Brandwood. My company is TBL Systems, as you can see there. The work I'm about to talk about is work I've done for several years, actually, with network research, who we're going to hear more about later on. It's called Utopia, so I should probably explain what that word means in this context. It's something we started in 2006, and it was triggered really with our frustrations with the software that we had before. And those frustrations particularly were to do with data being scattered all over the place and different formats, and just as a software developer, it was very difficult to sort of build anything on top of that, because it's very difficult to actually get at the data we needed. So we launched, as Jerome mentioned, we launched a process of comprehensively specifying everything that the company needed from its software as a whole. So ignoring what's out there on the marketplace, just thinking about everything that the company needed, regardless of the system we were going to choose, and then taking that out to the marketplace and looking at what systems were available to meet all of those individual requirements. So to show you what I mean by that, we looked at all the different areas that we needed to cater for. So CATI, interviewing, obviously coding, analysis, personnel management, etc., etc. All of these elements are the things that the business network research needs to computerize in some form or another. So our job then was to go out and try and find a system that would tick all of those boxes and provide those things for us. Now, obviously, it's very ambitious. As great as Askia is, it's unlikely that they were going to meet all of those requirements, but they met quite a lot of them, and to a sufficiently high standard. And crucially, because the system is so open and it's designed for people to be able to sort of build their own things on top of, we could integrate our existing systems with Askia, and then all of those boxes that they couldn't cater for, we could actually cater for ourselves. So probably one of the primary reasons we chose Askia was the fact that although they can't do everything, and obviously they've got a specialism, the option is always there to build whatever we needed. So we knew that although they couldn't give us everything we needed, we knew that we could fill in the gaps ourselves and fill in the blanks. So I'm not going to talk about all of those elements there. There really isn't enough time. But I'm going to focus on two specific areas. A third area, Rahan, who's coming up next, is going to talk about in a bit more detail. But I'm just going to give you a flavour of the sort of thing I'm talking about in terms of extending the Askia system. I'm going to talk about two areas, field planning and what I've called field analysis. First of which, field analysis. What do I mean by that? There on the left, you can see a report run from Supervisor. You're probably all very familiar with that. You probably recognise that. So when I talk about field analysis, I'm not talking about simply just running reports. What I'm talking about is more than simply fixed static reports. What I'm talking about enables a more sophisticated interrogation of the field stats. So instead of just running fixed reports, you're actually interrogating the data and thereby squeezing more value out of the data that Askia provides. So let's have an example. Supposing somebody comes to you and says, I want to know about all of the calls that we made throughout 2009, and I want that broken down by month and by call centre. I should say network research has 4 call centres, so that kind of analysis is actually very, very important. You are going to really struggle to get those numbers out of the static reports in Supervisor. That's going to be a lot of messing about to get that information out. The system we've managed to put together allows users to go into Excel, a simple tool that we're all very familiar with, and create a pivot table by just dragging the documents in here, and then basically create a report that answers that exact specific query. So the query itself wasn't known in advance, and those queries can just vary all sorts of different things you might want to look at. So you don't know in advance what you're going to be asked for, but you can create a system that can cater for those type of questions and those type of queries whenever they might arise. So how does that work? I'm not going to give you massive amount of technical detail, but I want to just illustrate how that works on a sort of architectural level. At the bottom here, we have two databases from the Askia system, the statistics database and the call center database, and then crucially, information from our own corporate data together, as we saw earlier on, sort of bound together. And we have a periodic process that pulls just the information we need out of there and puts it into a data warehouse. So it's only the bits of information that we need, but we know we're going to need in the future for reporting. I should say data warehousing is a bit of a grand term. It doesn't necessarily mean a separate building and full of computers and whatever. It can just simply be a separate database that just sits alongside your existing Askia databases or whatever. But crucially, it's a SQL Server thing, and built into SQL Server, I'm presuming the majority of people are using SQL Server, certainly for the statistics side of stuff. From 2005 onwards, there's a tool called Analysis Services built into that. You've already paid for it. It's just sitting there waiting to be used. And that reads data from a data warehouse and pre-aggregates it and gets it into a form that is then suited for the type of ad hoc analysis requests that I showed you earlier in Excel. So that basically provides the data source for that. And you can then make that the centralized database source for all your fixed reports, going back to that again, so you can build your own ad hoc reports or your own customized reports that sit on top of that provide the information in the form that your organization needs it in, rather than the sort of the off-the-shelf pre-made ones that Askia provide. And then you can really go to town, and then you can get off-the-shelf dashboard products that know how to talk to this sort of data, and you can really go mad, and you can provide dashboards for different users within the organization, and you can provide different views of the data for different types of people, and so on and so forth. So by just binding your data together and structuring it correctly, you open up a whole world of opportunities in terms of reporting. So that's field analysis. Field planning, I should just say, by the way, yeah, this field analysis, that is just using a standard off-the-shelf SQL Server product. So, you know, you could all go home today and start playing with that if you wanted to. Field planning is slightly different because it's more of a custom software development. If field analysis is looking back at the past and measuring performance and analysing performance, then field planning is looking ahead and planning shifts and allocating interviewers to shifts and jobs and so on and so forth. Now I'm sure all of you have to manage field and resources in some form or another. In the case of network research, this is not an easy task because they do thousands and thousands and thousands of interviewers across 4 centres. It's very, very complicated juggling the resources and matching everything together to make sure that we hit targets on time. And the previous method was, it's done in Excel. It was manual. It was laborious. It's fiddly. It's very reactive. And I'm sure probably a lot of people here can relate to that kind of description. So we set about with the system we've got with Askia and all the integration that we've got. We set about building a system to help us get a bit more scientific with the way that we plan field. Again, I'm not going to bore you too much with the technical details, but just to give you a picture of how it works architecturally, again, we've got our Askia data over there on the left, and we've got our own corporate data here on the right, things like details about schedules, timings, interviewers, the capacity of the call centres, and so on and so forth. The other half of the equation that's important for planning field. And we have a little engine in between which we've called Monty, which periodically looks at all of those data, works out what's going on, and then updates the picture of field in a sort of real-time basis, and then just presents that information out to an internal intranet for people to plan future field work and monitor the current situation. So it's a very sophisticated system, and it's superseded the use of Supervisor for monitoring field because it draws together our own internal data along with the Askia data. It provides that higher level of depth to the information, which obviously you don't get off the shelf from Supervisor. So to give you a visual picture of how this looks for the user, for field planning we have a page like this on the intranet site that just lists out it gives you a list of dates for field and shifts along the right, and allows people in field to allocate interviewers to different shifts and days. And it calculates the number of interviews you're expected to get as you play around with the allocations. So it gives you an interactive tool to be able to just play around with the allocations and see the result of the corresponding results, and basically arrive at an optimal field plan. As field work progresses, we have displays like this, which show in the blue line there your completes building up each day. The orange line is a prediction of the future, and the green line is this is the target that you're aiming at. So as each day goes by, automatically this thing just progresses, and you can get a feel for whether the field is progressing as expected, or whether you're going over or under, and it gives you a visual image of how well you're doing, which you just don't get from just an instant sort of snapshot in a fixed report. And then lastly, there's this initially horrendous looking dashboard here, which lists out all of the projects that are currently going on in field and their current status, how many interviews we've done, what the productivity is, how many interviews we're predicted to do, what the scheduled finish date is, and what the predicted finish date is. And it highlights automatically areas that may be a problem. So you can see there's reds and yellows in there, and they indicate various different things. Now, the really important thing about this is that the people who are in charge of looking after field don't necessarily have to trawl through everything to find the problems. The problems come in search of them, so they get flagged up straight away, and it allows you to instantly sort of go in and investigate problems, which is a huge time saver. So that's more or less it. So to summarise, as I said earlier, the open architecture of Askia allows you to build custom tools that meet any specific requirements that your organisation has. And that is genuinely a real strength of Askia, which, sadly, is probably only one other company that I would say that about. And lastly, if you do it right, you centralise your data and you integrate it with Askia, you can really open up information across the enterprise and really start to provide really key information in real time to the right people at the right time. So that's it. Feel free to speak to me afterwards. My rates are very reasonable. Thank you very much.